I added a door to my house, and something wouldn't stop knocking on it. A few years ago my wife and I moved into our dream house. We went to the absolute limit of our budget to get it, and have had to cut back on vacations and such until I start earning more at work. But it is the perfect house for us, an office for me to work from home, a huge yard for her to create her dream garden, a nice room for our young son, now almost 4 years old, and a spare playroom upstairs. A 3-car garage for us to store all my crap. I'm a bit of a craft supply hoarder, and plenty of room to expand if and when we want to. It's at the end of a quiet, dead-end street, so no through traffic, but we love our neighbors. A few months ago, while we were away for a few days, a pipe burst in the bathroom next to my office. It soaked fully through the wall and completely saturated the carpet. The restoration process was long and fighting with insurance was a pain, but last month, my office was finally restored and I could get back to work. While the contractors were at it, we decided to have some additional work done. The office shares a wall with the garage, and I thought it would be nice to have a door there so that I could move freely into a workshop I've started setting up. The door is great. I really enjoy being able to step directly out to my 3D printer, laser cutter, workbench, etc. Then, about a week after the restoration was finished, there came a knock at the door. It was while I was working and our son was at preschool, so I assumed my wife wanted to come in through the garage, or maybe ask me a question while she was gardening. I was in the middle of an email, so I said 1 minute and finished writing before opening the door. By the time I did, there was no one there. I meant to ask the wife what she wanted when I saw her later, but I'm pretty forgetful about things like that, so it didn't come up. A few days later, it happened again, 3 sharp knocks, exactly the same cadence as the first time. I had forgotten about the previous incident until then. Again, there was no one there. I stepped into the garage and looked around. Nothing but a chill. I thought of a few rational explanations. I had been listening to a Let's Play video. Maybe the knocking was actually from that. Or perhaps it was the neighbor hammering something and it just sounded closer than it was. It was a little weird, but I wasn't alarmed yet. The next night, after I put our son to bed, I was gaming with some friends in the office, and it happened again. Knock. It was just a few seconds before I could step away and open the door. It was dark, but the exterior door that led from the garage to the side yard was open, swinging slightly from what I thought was wind. But when it came to a stop all the way open, it fell still. I stepped into the door frame and looked around, and didn't feel any breeze. Just the cold, still November air. I had a moment of genuine fear, but felt incredibly stupid when I realized my wife was screwing with me. We enjoy horror, and occasionally we'll try to scare each other. Remember that one guy whose wife who wouldn't stop smiling at him? I shared that with her back then, and for a while we pranked each other by hiding in weird places with big smiles. It was a good gag, but it had been a while since either of us had done something like this. I went out to find her in the living room, pretending to watch Great British Bake Off or something but really just doom scrolling, and said, "Nice one, you really had me there." She played dumb, exactly as I expected, but I was confident I'd figured it out. I decided the next time she did it, I would jump right up to catch her before she could get away. Sure enough, around midday that Friday, I was finishing up my work for the week when it came again, louder this time. Knock. I leapt up, but I'd forgotten that I had it bolted, and slammed face first into it. Despite being dazed, I unlocked it and swung it back, but by then she had gotten away again. I looked out the office window expecting to see her racing around the side of the house to the back door, but to my surprise, she was kneeling in the fenced-in garden 50 yards away, halfway through digging a hole for an apple tree. At that moment, a part of me just thought, wow, I didn't know she was that fast, but another part was doubting again. I don't know if anyone is that fast, but maybe I was dazed longer than I thought. At this point, I decided to just leave the door open while I was in the room. And that worked. There was no more knocking for a week. I closed the door at night when I locked up the house for bed, and opened it when I went to work in the morning. I stopped thinking about it. It just became part of the routine. That changed last night around 1:00 a.m. I woke up suddenly, but wasn't sure why until a minute later, when I heard it. Bang, so loud I could hear it upstairs in bed. It sounded angry now, or maybe frantic. I laid there in disbelief for what felt like an hour, but probably only a few minutes. Bang. I shook my wife awake and asked her to listen, but then, naturally, it stopped. Nothing for 10 minutes, and she rolled over and went back to sleep. Eventually I drifted off too, but was woken back up again an hour or so later. Bang. I mustered up every ounce of to hell with this energy I could. I grabbed my pocket folding knife from my nightstand, just wanting something in my hand to give me some courage, and went downstairs. I paused in the doorway of the office. Bang. I slowly crept up to the door, leaving the light off. Somehow I thought if whoever was there didn't know I was coming, it couldn't run away before I opened it. I reached the door. Bang bang bang. I slowly put one hand on the deadbolt, and one on the handle, ready to turn them both, and waited. Bang bang. I turned the bolt and knob and flung the door back. It should have hit whatever was banging on it. I held the knife up in front of me, certain that my cheap 4-blade would scare off whatever it was, but it was only darkness. In my memory now, it was darker than normal nighttime darkness. It was windowless room darkness, bottom of the ocean darkness. Thick, heavy, stifling. I held my breath, frozen. For ages, nothing happened. After a moment, I swore I heard a whisper, barely audible. I leaned towards the wall of blackness, straining to hear, when a gust of wind blew in through the door, powerful enough that it knocked me off my feet. With it came the single loudest bang yet. Then, everything was still once more. Finally I stood, and closed and locked the door. When I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked up, my heart nearly jumped out all over again. My son stood motionless on the top step above me, silhouetted by the dim yellow glow of a motion-triggered night light behind him. Trying to mask the shaking in my voice, I called to him. "Hey, bud, do you need something? Are you thirsty?" He didn't answer for long enough that I started to sweat. When he spoke, his sweet, innocent voice was eerily deadpan. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me in." With that, he turned and walked back through the door to his room, shutting it behind him. I returned to bed, but didn't sleep. He was uncharacteristically quiet all morning, sitting motionlessly on the living room floor. My wife wouldn't leave his side, checking his temperature, trying to snap him out of it, but I didn't think he was sick. I don't know what came over me, but I only had one idea left. I went to the garage, grabbed a heavy log cutting axe, and brought it to the door. My wife stepped in to ask me if we should call a doctor, just in time to see me swing it as hard as I could. As soon as it cracked into the wood, my son screamed a shrill, painful scream from the other room. I've never heard him scream like this before. It was like he'd been racked by a pain worse than any his little body had felt before. My wife ran to him, shouting his name. I wanted to follow, but I couldn't stop. I swung the axe again, and he screamed again. My wife yelled for me to stop, but I didn't. I swung and swung and swung, until the door was nothing but splinters. As it broke apart, my son's screams faded, and by the time I was done, he had gone quiet. Panting, I crept into the living room, bracing myself for what I would see. My wife was on the floor, shaking him awake, crying his name. I knelt beside her. His eyes were closed, he was drenched in cold sweat. I put my hand on his cheek and he flinched, then opened his little eyes. "Daddy?" he whispered. My wife sobbed and squeezed him so tight I had to pull her away for him to catch his breath. A few hours passed, and we had mostly calmed down. We have an appointment in an hour to make sure he's okay, but by now he's mostly returned to his normal self. Before I sat down to write this, I stood in my office staring at the carnage. When my wife came in, wiping away a last tear, she laughed out some of the tension she'd been holding in. "I guess you'll need another door." I contemplated for a moment, and took a deep breath. "Fuck that. Let's just put the wall back in."